Welcome to the Market Mystics podcast, where we discuss what's happening in the cryptosphere and trading on Earth as it is in heaven. Buckle up and huddle on while we dive in and get weird. Here are your hosts, Joshua and Kim.
Hey everyone.
Hey.
Welcome to Thursday, January 13th. What do we have on the plate today, Kim?
We're calling this episode Fed Up with Inflation. So we're going to talk about all of the news that's been out there about the major hyperinflation that has been everywhere in the news, really. Mm-hmm. It's based in the US, but it's in other places. The dollar obviously affects every other place in the world. So that's where we're going to start it.
Sounds good to me. Well, so easily, I think inflation has been something that I've heard talked about since I was a kid. Mm-hmm. It's so common. You know, it's, these are this year's inflation numbers, and this is the next year's inflation numbers. And what does this mean for you? And, you know, you can think about when I was a kid, a pack of gum was a nickel and now it's 50 cents. And yes, that's inflation. But when it's over a lifetime, it sort of gets swept just along with society, and it doesn't seem to really affect you that much.
You don't feel the impact so heavily.
Yes. Mm-hmm. But what we're experiencing now is inflation that's going up. Maybe what used to happen in a year in weeks or months' time. And that's impacting your trips to the grocery store, your trips to the gas station. You know, that's impacting your life in a very quick way, very noticeable.
It's true. When we talk about inflation, I'm going to get into like the real simple stuff, because I'll be honest, I don't have the deepest knowledge of all this stuff. And some of this is still new to us as well. And honestly, I would rather talk in layman's terms than try to make everything super technical.
Sure. Yeah. Neither one of us are like economists, or we're not financial advisors. It's just simply our opinions and the way that we understand things.
It's true. Okay. So inflation is essentially the value of the dollar going down, which makes goods and products and services, the price of that seemingly go up. So that's essentially what inflation is. A lot of it in the US is controlled by the Fed, which is the Federal Reserve. It's the central bank that prints.
Controls our currency.
It is not a government entity. I'll say that. It is called the Fed, but it is not a federal government branch or organization or anything like that. It is private. And I think that's something that people don't talk about so much.
Right.
Like we talk about the Fed and it sounds like it's just part of our government, but it's not.
I think there is some government oversight or supposed government oversight, but it is not part of our government. And, maybe some of the reason we don't talk about it is simply it's a pretty good job of marketing. Like, if you want to have a private industry that individuals are profiting off of and hide it as a public service, I mean, they did a pretty good job.
They did a great job with that. Okay, anyway, so the Fed essentially has loaned money to the US government, and the government has to repay these loans, and there's an interest rate that they set, the Federal Reserve sets. And so a lot of times, I think it's quarterly that the Fed comes out and either adjusts the interest rate or doesn't.
Right.
And that's kind of one of the places that we're getting this hyperinflation from in the last week or so. Is it was Jerome Powell, who is, I don't know if he's just the spokesperson or what his position is exactly, but for years he's been the guy who comes and gives the reports on the interest rates from the Fed. Okay, that being said, let's talk about one of the really big issues that's causing inflation. Josh, you found this piece of information, and I thought it was so interesting about the number of US dollars printed.
Yes. Yes. So roughly 40% of all dollars that are in circulation have been printed in the last 12 months. And I'm not entirely sure when that was taken. I believe it was in 2021 what those numbers are referencing. But what I was able to find was January 2020, there were roughly $4 trillion in circulation.
Mhm.
January 2021, there was $6.7 trillion in circulation. And January 2022, there's 8.8 trillion. And so, there is a slightly less percentage increase from 21 to 22, but it's still a very quick, just within 2 years, we've more than doubled where we used to be. And that's kind of a big deal.
That is kind of a big deal. And no wonder the dollar's value is going down and the prices of goods are going up.
Mm,
You know what I mean? If we're just doubling the number of banknotes we have,
right.
then and a pack of gum is still costing the same to produce. I mean, it makes perfect sense why inflation is where it is.
Right. And you had some really interesting numbers of price increases over the year.
Mhm.
And, you know, gasoline has gone up and down so much my whole life.
It
Like,
kind of depends on the president, I feel like.
yeah, I remember times where it's been under $1, it's been over $3. Like it's gone up and down. So I think it could be hard to really pin an exact inflation number on fuel, but this report shows it was up almost 50% in a year.
Right.
And kind of in a stable way. Like it wasn't just fluctuating momentarily up and down. Like as a general rule, it's been pretty expensive. It's been up a lot. The
It has.
price of
However, I would
yes.
also like to interject this. When the whole COVID thing hit, March 2020,
Mm,
gas prices went way down. I
yeah.
remember I was overseas when everything kind of hit the fan. And when I got back, I couldn't believe that the gas prices were so low when I got there. And I know it was a controlled thing. I don't know who made that decision, who made that determination, but they made gas prices go way, way lower than they had been in years and years. So that being said, this 50% increase from a year ago may
Right.
not actually be
A true representation.
right of what it is like even in the last 5 years. I do have to
Yeah.
say that because I don't feel like gas prices now are that different than they were 5 years ago.
Mhm. And some of these numbers, I'm also curious about how much of it is inflation and how much of it is pandemic related. I mean,
Yeah.
this particular article is not necessarily about inflation. Like it's just talking about the cost of life,
Right.
from a year. And so like you look at vehicles, and like used cars are so valuable right now because new car production has been slowed down,
Yeah.
largely due to all these computer chips that pretty much every sector of our life revolves around computing. And if you can't produce the materials for it, then they can't build the cars. And so you have like used cars being up 37% and new cars being up like 11%. You drive by car dealerships and their lots are a half or a third or less
Right.
of what they used to be. And it's kind of amazing, just the difference that so quickly we have come through.
Absolutely. I mean, if you listen to any part of our intro into why we trade and stuff, I talked about how I spent the last 15 years in the auto industry. And it was just a year ago this month that was my last time in that industry. But from the onset of the pandemic to that time, it was a huge change in inventory. It was nearly impossible to get used cars. They were selling at auction for wholesale more than you could retail them for. Um, the new car production had gone down because of lack of the materials like you were talking about, and even a lot of the shutdowns with like
Mm,
COVID outbreaks or something, and having to shut down factories for 2 to 4 weeks to get all of that cleared out. Stuff like that really was contributing to that. And so people needed cars still, but they were just nearly impossible to find, which
right.
drove the prices up. I mean, it
Yeah.
can't help but drive the prices up.
I mean, we saw that in the housing market, we
Mhm.
saw that in vehicles, pretty much every area of life. If inflation hasn't affected it, the pandemic has affected it.
Right. And at this point, they're kind of linking arms, and it's kind of one and the
Right.
same. One has affected the other and the other has affected the first one,
Hmm.
so I don't even know that we need to separate it anymore. It's
True.
just that it's not normal inflation anymore, right?
Yeah. And, we were talking about um, like the central bank's interest rates. So
Mm.
they've been held very low in an attempt to stimulate the economy for quite a while now,
Yeah.
like near zero. And that is I mean, it's beneficial if you're in the market for a
Mhm.
loan. If
Right.
you're going to buy a house or a car and you're taking out a loan, it's awesome to have super low interest rates. But what that's an indicator of is that there's not strength in the economy to support paying interest on anything. And that's a dangerous place to be.
Hmm.
And I think that one of the reasons that they've been able to keep interest rates low is because of the rate that they're printing money, and they're artificially keeping it low. And I think at one point, it's like you're building a tower with blocks. At one point, one of the blocks is going to move, and I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, it could be maybe it stabilizes quickly, but maybe it crashes down a little bit. I don't really know what's going to happen with that, but it does seem that we are artificially holding something up, and I don't know how long you can do that.
I think you're right. One of the things that we've talked about has been how does this affect cryptocurrency and trading?
Mm,
And what is the inflation going to do to that? There are lots of different opinions out there. We all have our own opinions. Some say, as hyperinflation is happening with the dollar, the markets are going to also go down. Others hold the exact opposite opinion. I'm one of those people. Just to be honest. And the reason I say this, again, I'm not an economist, and I don't have a ton of background in knowing everything about markets, but from what I've observed, even just last year in the US, when they were releasing stimulus packages to citizens, I remember Josh and I were in South Africa with some of our friends. We are sitting on the couch watching the stimulus being released to bank accounts simultaneously as Bitcoin was hitting 60,000 for the first time. And it was interesting to see that it was like the more money they printed and released, the higher the prices of cryptocurrency was going. So it's like the dollar was devaluing, and things that had not so much basis in the dollar were going up. And I think that's one thing that we really need to tie together here and see what is this going to do to the crypto markets? Because that's real. I mean, that's what our whole show is about. This is about crypto markets and what's happening. But I think that's something to look at and really pay attention to.
I think it's also interesting how, as more dollars are entering the market, that you have simultaneously dollars leaving the market to go into crypto. That, I think that's very, very telling of where the general public is placing value.
Agreed. I think we're getting to this place. Okay, well, I am personally getting to this place where I'm disenchanted by the dollar. And we're seeing it more and more just by how the markets are moving. When you're seeing those dollars leaving the normal economy and going into these decentralized markets, these decentralized currencies, technologies, all of these things, I think it's pretty telling of the amount of faith that people put in the dollar these days. I know it's still king currency, but the value is just, it's becoming more and more weak, whether you see it in the numbers or not. And honestly, value is based on what people say something is worth.
True.
I don't know how to say it more simply than that, but people are like, why would you invest in Bitcoin? I've heard this question like thousands of times, probably. And it's like, people want to say, oh, it's digital. What makes you think it has any value? And my answer is always, it has value because you say it has value. It's the same with gold. It's the same with your dog, whatever. It has value because you think it has value.
Right. We were just talking before the show how currency has really evolved from seashells to precious metals to banknotes to crypto. And I'm sure there's many that I skipped over, but it has truly evolved. And it's exactly what you're saying. Those things held value because at the time, that's what we chose to give value to. You wouldn't be able to walk into a grocery store with a bag of seashells and buy groceries today because there's no value in that. In most of the time, even though gold still holds value, you still can't do that. Most places wouldn't accept that. And I think it's so interesting to me that how we have limited our buying power to one thing. And I suppose there's some convenience to that because historically, before there was a central bank that issued notes, you would have individual banks issuing notes and only be able to spend those at places that were within that banking system. And so I'm sure that caused a lot of, just a lot more hassle because it was so spread out. And so there probably is some sense of fluidity and just simplicity of life in having things be issued by one place. But that also takes out your all of your ability to have any say. I mean, it almost, there was the joke in 2008 when things crumbled that the banks were too big to fail. Well, to some extent, we're at that place with our central bank where it's too big to fail without causing catastrophic consequences.
Right.
And when you had individual banks issuing notes and someone went bankrupt within that system, or the bank wasn't able to support the notes they were issuing, it had a much smaller impact because it wasn't nationwide or even globally as our central banks are now.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I want to just point out, and we haven't talked about this before, but I was just thinking about it as you were talking about kind of the evolution of what has been currency. And I would even argue, and this is, I don't know if anyone else would support me in this argument, but I was just thinking about cash versus the digital dollar. So paper money, paper dollars versus digital dollars.
Right.
Honestly, we have evolved from having cash money on hand to the primary currency being the digital dollar. Whether anyone is calling it that or not, we joke a lot. And again, this is telling about my stance on the dollar, that cash is trash. I believe everything is going digital. And that's why I would say those things. But honestly, even in the last year and a half or 2 years, there have been stores I've gone into where they won't accept cash anymore.
Yeah.
They say you pay with exact change or else you're not getting any change back, or you pay with a debit or credit card. And that tells me that things have evolved to only accepting digital currency, which is not that far off from cryptocurrency. It just is the difference between centralized currency and decentralized currency.
So I'm thinking of our city recently built a new baseball stadium, and it's a cashless stadium. None of the vendors, you can't buy tickets, you can't buy a hot dog, you can't do anything with cash. And I believe also our big arena downtown is the same way. And it's, it still has the same name, still calls it a dollar, but it's really a digital currency. And I think we are so close as a society to really having a digital currency. And maybe that's why crypto has made an easy step into society, is because it's honestly not that far off from what we have. The big difference is centralized versus decentralized.
Right. But what do you mean by that? Can you explain it?
It's kind of hard. So this is interesting. We were talking about the Jack Dorsey, the CEO of Twitter.
Former
CEO of Twitter. Sorry. Yes. He recently came out kind of not really attacking, pointing out facts about current cryptocurrencies.
Right.
And this is a quote from him. He says, "I am not anti-Ethereum. I am anti-centralized, venture capitalist owned, single point of failure, corporate controlled lies." And that is such a powerful statement, because what he's pointing out is Ethereum has marketed itself as being a decentralized cryptocurrency. But if you look at the facts and this, if you look at just the details of how it is so controlled by venture capitalist firms, by the big money people. It is not a cryptocurrency by the people for the people. It
Right.
has it maybe started that way, but it has quickly become controlled by the the same people who control the current digital dollar.
Exactly. I think that is the big difference between centralized, decentralized. Essentially, decentralized currency is by the people for the people. We could
Mhm.
go back to the Revolutionary War at the onset of the United States being formed and breaking off from Great Britain, and it was about the same thing. This isn't a new concept. It just happens to be revitalized in the economy right now. You know,
Right.
people want to be in charge of their own value or worth. You know what I mean? And I don't think it's that much to ask. This is why you're going to get to know me and all my opinions about this, and so just bear with me. But this is why some of the regulations over financials in the US are so overbearing, is because it is, to me, it's overstepping by the government saying, I know what to do with your finances better than you could ever know what to do with them. And I just don't think that's true. And I think that's one of the great things about this decentralized cryptocurrencies that are out there. And there are many of them. Bitcoin is the biggest, but a lot of the coins out there are also decentralized tokens. They're decentralized currencies, and you can control what you put into it. You can control how you spend it. You also, as a small person, still have some say in its value. And that's not really the case anymore with the dollar.
You know, we saw this a little bit last year with meme coins and meme stocks,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
where, you know, maybe to a point you could also put Bitcoin in the same category as Ethereum, where the largest holders of it probably are venture capitalist firms and big money people. That's possible.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't know a lot of the details, but one of the reasons that meme coins were so offensive to the mainstream financial system was it was a large group of people putting their value in something worthless,
Right.
putting their value in something that the financial industry didn't see value in.
I
And
love it.
that's amazing because that was very disruptive.
It
You know,
is.
I think about GameStop and AMC, where they really just said, hey, what you're doing is wrong, and we're going to put value here. And then you look at crypto and you have Doge and Shibu and all, like, just you can scroll through and probably 25 to 50% of the crypto are meme coins because people started putting their value and saying, no, I don't care what you're saying has value. This is what has value to me.
Right.
And that is powerful.
It is powerful. And we look at things like Doge, which really started as, I mean, it was a joke, right?
Yeah.
It's still, even in 2021, was looked at as a joke. And Doge has been around for what, almost,
It's one of the oldest coins.
isn't it like the second oldest coin?
It's somewhere, I can't remember exactly when it was started. I think maybe 2013. So like 4 or 5 years after Bitcoin. Um, but I mean, it's been around a long time.
It has been around for a long time. So it was this really a joke in the crypto markets, even more so in any other realm of financials. But last year, you see this surge with it, and you see people with a lot of influence talk about Elon Musk, who talks about Doge and has talked about accepting it as payment in some of his multinational corporations.
Talked about, I believe that they used uh, Doge to fund a rocket that SpaceX actually used. And it's
To the moon.
right, really, it's the first. I remember him doing that because he was talking about how it was the first crypto funded like space thing, and it was also the first meme in space, and he thought, that was just amazing. And so do I. Like, but what you saw from that is you saw retailers starting to accept Doge as payment for things.
Mhm.
And largely it was within the tech sector. But why is that? It's because the people who were buying their products saw value in Dogecoin.
Right.
So they said, well, if our customers see value in this, then we need to see value in that, because that helps us move product.
This
And
is
that,
the beauty of the decentralized currency, because
right,
it starts with the people and it goes to the providers and then it moves up the line, as opposed to starting with a government saying this has value, you better recognize it has value too, and then being downhill to just the normal Joe Schmo,
right.
right? That's the grassroots movement that I think is happening with cryptocurrency. And it's a beautiful thing.
I agree. So as the market mystics, how do you what do you see in the spirit? What do you see in the heavens regarding, inflation and value? And I know we've talked a little bit before about, um, seeing value before in the spirit, but maybe what have you seen specifically over this?
Right. I've talked about it before, that the father showed me the dollar and told me that he sees no value in it, which is largely the reason that I also see no value in it. And I'll
Mhm.
be really clear about that. That came from him to me, not through somebody else, my pastor or spiritual leader or whatever. This was a conversation I had with him personally. But when I'm seeking him and when I'm asking him about inflation and the stuff that's going on essentially in the world economy, because let's be real, what happens with the US dollar affects the rest of the world because they also look to the dollar as the king. Um, what the father has been showing me is there's a reason he's been leading people to cryptocurrency and putting value there, so that when this inflation does come, there's peace that can be had over this. Like it's still in his hands and he still is having control over this, and he is still caring for his people and leading them in the right direction, even though it may be a tough road ahead.
Yeah, that fits very well with what I've seen. So we were, engaging in the spirit before we started recording and talking about inflation, asking God about it. And one of the things that I saw was, we've seen and we've heard friends and other people talk about kind of the financial system as being a platform that's held up.
Mm.
And currently it's held up and tilted so that everything flows one direction. The government gives you money, and from that moment on it always flows back towards them.
Mhm.
That's just the way things are set up right now, and it's very corrupt. It's not for the people. It's not, I would argue, it's not sustainable. So what we were what I was shown was inflation being one of the blocks that this platform was held up with.
Mm.
And as that block crumbled and fell, the whole platform dropping down and its tilt kind of becoming a little bit more neutral. And what was important about that was we may have opportunities when some of these institutions and structures that have been holding up this financial world, when those crumble, we have an opportunity to catch the platter and balance things out. We have an opportunity to bring balance to the financial system. But if we aren't prepared for it, if we're not good stewards of it when that time comes, then it just allows it to be rebuilt and goes back the way it was,
Mm.
or even flips out of balance the other direction. Either one is equally not beneficial. What we need is a balanced, fair, just system. But I think we have an opportunity to do that as pieces of it crumble. And maybe it can be done with just inflation. Maybe it requires the crumbling of the central banks. I think there's opportunities to catch the platform before it hits the ground,
Mhm.
but it just requires people being positioned and being able to steward that change well. And it's not that as you're walking into that financial promised land, that there's not giants that are in that land that you have to fight against. It's not without struggle or without it's not without some amount of work. There's something that goes involved in it, but it's your mindset of, is it worth it? And
Mm.
I just have to sit here and say yes.
Right.
Whatever it takes to bring balance to this system, it's worth it.
Yeah, I completely agree. Um, I know what the Lord has shown me about the financial system. And honestly, what you're talking about goes right in line with that, because he has kind of made promises about things changing and shift happening and things being even back out. And so when you're talking about the promised land, yeah, this is really, there are shifts that are going to happen to bring us into his promises. And you're right, they're not without some sacrifice or hardship or work or uncomfortability. That might be the
Right.
hardest one for us all to swallow, is like getting uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But is it worth it? Does it does it matter enough for you to endure those things and walk through it anyway? For me, I say yes.
Yeah. I think it's a choice that each person has to make for themselves. And your level of involvement is certainly going to depend on your level of relationship with Father,
Mhm.
because you may not be called to this particular thing to deal with directly, but one way or another, everyone is affected by the financial system.
Right.
So you're going to be affected by the change one way or another. You may not be called directly to be the part of the catalyst making the change, but
Mhm.
it's going to impact your life.
It's true. Absolutely. One other thing I have to say, you said it earlier, we might say it in every episode. I don't know. We might. But all of this also, the amount of peace that you can get, the amount of solace that you can get in all of this when things may seem like they're turning upside down, you've been left standing on your head, something like that. Things are just away from the norm. The amount of peace that you can get from this is going to be largely dependent upon your own relationship with the Lord. I can tell you what he's told me, and it may make some logical sense to you, or it may not. I don't know. Doesn't matter. But if you have that relationship with him, he's the one who administers that. He's the one who can give the big picture. He's the one who can tell you, yeah, you're on the right track. He's the one who can say, sit back and relax, or just that he's got this. And it really needs to come from him to you and not through me and not through Joshua. It really needs to be that personal relationship. And this isn't some evangelist call to know the Lord. It is me saying, rely on your own relationship. It's important. It will only get more important. So you might as well start now.
Yeah. Nothing more important.
True. I feel like this podcast just turned into our other podcast.
Maybe a little bit. That's all right. This podcast is our opinions, our thoughts, and our faith and relationship with Yahweh and heaven is going to seep into it in a big way.
That's true. That was the point all along. Just know we're going to get weird. So bear with us.
Or join in the weirdness.
Oh, or join in the weird. I mean, that's what I think we just had. I mean, what I was just saying, just you were just a little more concise about saying it.
Climb on board, people. It's a beautiful ride.
All right.
I think that wraps it up.
Agreed.
I think that's a good episode. And you know, if our friends are listening to this, I just have one last thing to say to you. I think. Love you all.
Thanks. Thank you for listening. Join us every Monday and Thursday as we discuss trading on earth as it is in heaven. If you want to connect further, follow us on social media at market.mystics for Instagram and TikTok, and search for Market Mystics on YouTube and Facebook. If you still need more, follow the link on Facebook to book a coaching appointment. Until next time, see ya.